And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, tonight's weather showing this week low moving into the south. Chance of showers over in the northern southeast coast with this week trough. Otherwise, a quiet pattern over the interior with slowly diminishing showers over the mountainous terrain and a fair amount of clearing with light winds here from the Gulf of Alaska all the way up to the Arctic coast. Light winds out into the Bering Sea as well, but windier conditions along this front in the central Aleutians. Could be, again, a narrow band of gale force winds right in advance of this front, say from between Atka and Nikolsky. Otherwise, not too bad. Light rain associated with it. Showers, thunderstorms developing here over the mountainous terrain of the central and eastern interior. Otherwise, mostly sunny in the west through tomorrow afternoon and warmer. Chance of showers, mostly cloudy skies for the southeast coast. And for the day on Saturday, cooler down to the south there with a chance of showers, milder, closer to 70 up here to the north with partly to mostly sunny skies. And again, after a partly to mostly sunny start, the eastern interior will see an increase in those clouds, developing showers and thunderstorms from the eastern Brooks Range all the way down to the Kenai Peninsula. Sunny and warm here, Bristol Bay on up to the north slope. This system stays put out here over the central Aleutians. Coastal water forecast there for the south coast of the Panhandle tomorrow. North winds 10 to 15 knots. Basically a westerly onshore breeze at about 10 knots on the central coast. Southeast winds at 10 knots up to the north. Lynn Canal, south winds 10 knots. Northwest at 10 for Stevens Passage. And Clarence Strait, south winds 15 knots. Northwest winds at 10 knots. Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait. Lynn Canal south at 10 knots. Northwest at 20 there for the south coast of the Panhandle, and the northwest winds at 15 knots for the central coast, and the north coast looking at west winds at 10 knots. Cook Inlet, variable winds 10 knots tomorrow. West to northwest winds at 20 knots for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands. Variable to west winds for the North Gulf Coast 10 to 15 knots, and Prince William Sound westerly breezes at 15 knots with seas no more than 3 feet. Then for Saturday, Cook Inlet and the Barren Islands, North Gulf Coast, and Prince William Sound, all looking at variable winds at 10 knots for the first day of the weekend. Northwest 15 for the Barren Islands. That's where the strongest winds will be found, and seas at about 4 feet. Kodiak Island for Friday, west-southwest winds at 20 knots, and east winds 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay, westerlies at 15. And then for Saturday, light west breeze at 10 knots for Bristol Bay. Seas only 1 foot for the Alaska Peninsula. East winds at 15 knots. And Kodiak Island, variable to southwest winds at 10 to 20 knots. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow. East winds 30 to 35 knots. East winds 30 knots for Adak and Atka. And then winds diminish as you head west here. Northeast 15 to 20 knots from Kiska to Shemya. And for Saturday, north to northeast winds at 15 knots there from Kiska to Shemya. Otherwise, east winds at 20 knots here for the central Aleutians. And so a little brisk on those winds for the Fox Islands out of the east at 30 knots with seas running 4 to 11 feet. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, light variable winds at 10. Light northwest wind at 5 knots, south at 5 knots for St. Lawrence Island. And west at 5 for Norton Sound, pick it up to 15 knots for St. Matthew Island out of the southeast, and east winds at 20 knots, 6-foot seas for the Pribilofs. And for the day on, Saturday, northeast winds 15 knots there for St. Lawrence Island and the Yukon Delta Coast, Kuskokwim Delta Coast north at 10, east at 20 for the Pribilof Islands. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, Friday, east at 15, light southeast wind at 10 knots for the central coast, and even lighter southwest breeze at 5 knots for the western coast. And the Chukchi Sea, south winds 15 to 20 knots with seas 3 to 4 feet. And for the day on Saturday, looking at south winds 15 to 30 knots here for the Chukchi Sea with seas 3 to 6 feet, southwest at 20 for the western Arctic coast, central coast, southeast at 10, variable winds 5 to 10 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast.